Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something you've likely experienced countless times, learning with other people. Now, your mind might immediately jump to group projects or study sessions, and you might be wondering what there is to deeply explore there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going way beyond the simple idea that collaborating is always a good thing. This deep dive, tailored specifically for you, is about understanding how to learn more effectively with your peers and, how to navigate those group dynamics to actually gain knowledge, not just a shared grade.
That's right. We're not taking it for granted that peer learning is automatically beneficial. We're digging into a fascinating 1994 paper from the Educational Psychology Review by O'Donnell and O'Kelly. They took a really close look at the theories and the realities of learning from each other.
Yeah,
Our goal is to pull out the most valuable insights from their work and make them clear and useful for you.
exactly. This isn't just about abstract ideas. We want you to walk away with a much clearer picture of the different ways peer learning can either really work or, let's be honest, fall flat sometimes.
Yeah, right.
We'll explore the fundamental concepts and, most importantly, what you can actually do to make your collaborations more successful. By the end, you'll be much better equipped to make the most of any group learning situation you find yourself in.
So let's start with a common perception. Peer learning, especially this concept of cooperative learning, it's often presented as like a universally good thing. You see it promoted everywhere in education.
Absolutely. It feels like there's increasing pressure on educators to use it, and it's definitely a standard topic in educational psychology. You almost get the sense that it's a foolproof method.
And it's not like this enthusiasm came out of nowhere. There have been summaries of research over the years suggesting that these cooperative learning approaches are effective. Researchers like Johnson and Johnson and Slavin have done a lot of work in this area, and their findings are often cited.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Even those early positive findings faced some questions later on, didn't they?
They did. Some researchers raised important methodological concerns about how those initial studies were actually conducted. For instance, back in 1982, Cotton and Cook looked at a major review by Johnson and colleagues and pointed out some issues with how the data was analyzed.
Huh?
Slavin himself, actually, in '89, questioned the types of tasks that were often used in the studies included in that review. And Balsert, in '88, had concerns about the comparison groups used in much of the cooperative learning research. So the picture wasn't always as straightforwardly positive as it might have initially seemed.
So while the initial enthusiasm was high, later research raised important questions about how those early studies were conducted, suggesting the benefits of peer learning weren't always as clear-cut as they first appeared. And this oversimplification can show up in unexpected places, right?
Exactly. The paper gives an example of a widely used elementary science textbook that recommends cooperative learning, but then only dedicates a single page to how it should actually be done.
Well, one page.
Yeah. It almost becomes a trendy term, and the deeper understanding of what makes it work gets kind of lost in the translation.
Which, unfortunately, can lead to some,
Yeah.
let's just say, interesting interpretations of what cooperative learning looks like in the real world.
Mhm.
Our source shares a perfect, if a little cringeworthy story about this. Tell us about that project.
Right. One of the author's colleagues recounted a cooperative learning project at his son's school that was, well, a misnomer, really. The students were paired up and each assigned a completely separate part of a project to do outside of class, on their own.
Uh-oh.
Then, get this, they received an individual grade for their part and a group grade.
Oh, no, this sounds like it's going to end badly.
It did. One student, sadly, didn't finish their assigned section and got an F. The other student worked hard, completed their part well, and earned an A.
Okay.
But the group grade ended up being a C. So the student who failed actually got a better overall outcome because of their partner's effort, while the student who did all the work had their grade pulled down.
Ouch. So no actual teamwork, no real cooperation, and a grading system that seems fundamentally unfair. I think a lot of us can probably relate to being in a group project like that.
Definitely.
It really highlights the huge difference between the ideal of cooperative learning and what sometimes happens in practice, and the basic confusion between simply working in a group and truly engaging in cooperative learning.
Absolutely. And this kind of misunderstanding underscores why it's not enough to just describe different techniques in teacher training. We really need to understand the why and the how behind them. This brings us to the idea that there isn't just one single way to approach learning with peers.
Right. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Our source points out that these different approaches actually come from various underlying theoretical perspectives.
Yes. Slavin, in his research, did a great job of categorizing these different viewpoints. He talked about social psychological approaches, which look at things like motivation and how groups stick together, cognitive approaches, which focus on how our thinking changes through interaction, and then approaches related to practice and how classrooms are organized to facilitate peer learning.
So the reasons why learning from peers might be effective really depend on which of these lenses you're looking through. It's almost like different researchers are focusing on different pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. The specific things that make the learning happen, the actual mechanisms at play, will be different depending on the core theory behind the approach. Let's begin by exploring those social behavioral perspectives.
Okay, let's unpack this. Social behavioral. That sounds like it's about how the social interactions and behaviors within a group influence what and how we learn.
Precisely. These ideas have their foundation in the work of Morton Deutsch back in 1949, who talked about cooperation happening when everyone in a group is working towards a shared goal, and if one person achieves that goal, it helps everyone else. He called this promotive interdependence, which later became known as positive interdependence.
Okay, positive interdependence.
From this broad idea, two main branches emerged: motivational approaches and social cohesion approaches.
Let's start with the motivational side. What's the main idea there?
The central idea is that students become more motivated to engage with the task when they are working together with peers. Robert Slavin's work really exemplifies this perspective. His student team's achievement divisions, or STAB technique, is a prime example of a motivational approach.
Remind us how STAD works.
Sure. First, the teacher presents a lesson to the whole class. Then, students work in small, diverse groups to review the material together. Their goal is to make sure everyone in their group is prepared for an individual quiz on what they've learned. They're encouraged to help each other understand the concepts, often using worksheets provided by the teacher to quiz each other and check their answers.
All right.
After this group study time, everyone takes the quiz individually. Finally, a group score is calculated based on how much each member improved compared to their own past performance, and rewards, like certificates or recognition, are often given to the teams with the highest improvement scores.
So the key things here seem to be that shared group goal, aiming for those rewards, and then this individual accountability piece,
Yeah,
making sure everyone is contributing and learning.
exactly. The positive interdependence is built in through the group rewards everyone benefits when the team does well, and individual accountability is ensured by focusing on improvement rather than just absolute scores. STAD has been used in a variety of subjects, mainly for practicing skills and reviewing material.
Okay.
So, for someone like you who might be in a study group, the key takeaway from this motivational approach seems to be the importance of having a shared goal and making sure everyone feels individually responsible. Does that sound right?
That makes sense. It's about creating a situation where everyone feels like they have a stake in the group's success. But as we're looking at the potential downsides, what are some of the problems that can arise with motivational approaches like STAD?
Well, one issue can be managing larger groups, say of 4 to 6 students. It can sometimes be difficult to ensure everyone is actively participating and that smaller subgroups don't form within the larger group.
Right.
Also, the rewards themselves can be a bit of a double-edged sword. Some research suggests that giving extrinsic rewards can sometimes decrease people's intrinsic motivation, so they become more focused on getting the reward than on actually understanding the material.
That's an interesting point. You can imagine students being more concerned with earning points or stickers
Yeah.
than with truly grasping the concepts.
And then there's the risk of social loafing, where some members might not contribute as much, knowing that their group grade might still be okay. Or, on the other hand, if the task is really difficult and the rewards are highly valued, certain members might feel under a lot of pressure from their peers to perform well. The difficulty of the task can really impact how well the group works together when rewards are on the line.
Yeah.
If not everyone can contribute effectively, you might see those negative group dynamics, like some students resenting having to do more work than others, what's sometimes called the sucker effect.
So how do techniques like STAD try to prevent these potential problems?
Slavin's techniques have specific design elements to address these issues. First, the tasks used instead are usually quite structured and not overly complex. They don't typically involve a lot of open-ended problem solving that might make it easier for some members to disengage.
Okay.
Instead, for example, the worksheets and an answer keys help to keep the task focused.
So it's about keeping the cognitive load manageable for everyone.
Precisely. Second, The emphasis on individual improvement scores is really important for accountability. It means that everyone, no matter their starting level, has the opportunity to contribute to the team's success.
Right.
It levels the playing field and gives everyone a reason to participate and value each other's contributions. If it were based solely on absolute scores, students who start out with less knowledge might feel discouraged and less motivated.
That improvement score element seems really clever in addressing that.
It is. And finally, the way STAD combines competition between groups with cooperation within groups can help build a sense of camaraderie. That feeling of we're all in this together against the other teams can really help maintain positive group dynamics and reduce those negative behaviors we talked about.
So in all of this, what does the teacher's role look like in a motivational approach like STAD?
The teacher plays a very active and central role. It's still fairly aligned with a more traditional teacher-led model. The teacher is the one who presents the initial lesson, decides on the rewards, assigns the students to groups, prepares and provides the learning materials like worksheets, and is responsible for keeping track of all the scores and publicizing the rewards.
Got it.
They really are the organizer and manager of the entire process.
Okay, let's shift gears to the other side of the social behavioral coin. Social cohesion approaches.
Yeah.
How are they different?
While they also come from Deutsch's work on cooperation, social cohesion approaches put more emphasis on building a sense of group identity and mutual concern among group members. Here, the primary motivation for students isn't necessarily about earning a reward, but more about wanting to support their teammates and not wanting to let them down.
So it's more about that internal drive to support your group.
Exactly. Successful cooperative learning in this framework really depends on those social bonds and a feeling of responsibility towards each other. Johnson's learning together technique is a good example of this. It includes elements like face-to-face interaction, positive interdependence, and individual accountability, but it strongly emphasizes the development of interpersonal and small group skills.
Right.
Slavin also points out that explicit interpersonal skill training and team-building activities are key features of this approach.
And what about group investigation? That seemed to be another example of a social cohesion approach.
Yes, group investigation by Sharon and Hertz-Lazarowitz really highlights the importance of social cohesion. In this technique, students have a significant amount of choice in what they study. The group collectively decides on a topic and how they will investigate it. They also plan together how they will present their findings to the rest of the class, and everyone participates in that decision-making process. The evaluation of their work comes from the teacher, from the other members of their group, and sometimes even from the other students in the class. Rewards aren't typically used in this approach, and the tasks tend to be focused on higher-order thinking and problem-solving.
This sounds like it requires a much higher degree of social maturity and investment from the students. So what are the potential challenges here?
Well, building that strong sense of social cohesion isn't always easy, even among adults working on projects. The paper actually shares some really insightful comments from college students who were assigned group projects.
Oh, yeah.
The overwhelming feeling was one of dread and negative expectations based on past experiences. Common complaints included group members not contributing their fair share and others having to pick up the slack, which led to resentment and that sucker effect we mentioned earlier.
The sucker effect again.
Yeah. The crucial insight here for you is that simply putting people together isn't enough. You need to actively foster a sense of team and address any potential friction.
That feeling of being taken advantage of can really destroy any sense of team spirit.
Absolutely. And these social cohesion approaches really rely on group members having good social skills and a degree of tolerance for each other, which can vary a lot depending on age and experience. Complex tasks can put a real strain on group cohesion if students don't have the skills to work through those challenges together effectively. On the other hand, if the tasks are too simple or unengaging, people might get bored and not see the need to really interact or rely on each other. The size of the group and the mix of personalities, abilities, and levels of commitment can also significantly influence the group dynamic.
So how can these social cohesion approaches try to prevent these kinds of problems?
Explicit team-building activities, directly focusing on helping students identify with their group, and providing training in essential social skills are really important. The authors point out that teachers, especially at higher education levels, sometimes hesitate to spend time on these areas, but without this foundation, these social cohesion approaches are much less likely to be successful.
That makes sense.
Teaching skills in conflict management and resolution is also crucial. Simply having regular discussions about how the group is functioning and how members are interacting during tasks can go a long way in building that sense of cohesion and addressing issues as they arise.
And the teacher's role shifts quite a bit in these approaches, doesn't it?
Yes. The teacher becomes more of a facilitator and a guide. They need to clearly communicate the expectations for how students should interact socially, actively reinforce positive behaviors they observe, and really support the team-building activities and those important discussions about group process. The types of cooperative tasks that the teacher selects also play a significant role in shaping the social interaction within the groups. Tasks like group investigation, which are complex, interesting, and give students a lot of ownership and responsibility, can be very effective in fostering that sense of shared purpose and strong cohesion.
Okay, we've explored how social dynamics and motivation play a role. Now let's move into the realm of the mind. Cognitive approaches to peer learning. What's the main focus here?
Cognitive approaches shift the focus from the social aspects to the cognitive interdependence of the group members. The central idea is that interacting with peers leads to positive learning outcomes because it encourages individuals to change and refine their own understanding and knowledge structures. There are two main sub-approaches within this perspective: cognitive developmental approaches and cognitive elaboration approaches.
Let's start with the cognitive developmental side. What are the key ideas there?
This perspective suggests that peer learning is effective because it helps participants develop new ways of thinking. Both Piag's and Vygotsky's theories have been influential here, although they offer somewhat different explanations for how this cognitive development happens through peer interaction.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, the Vygotskian view emphasizes the guidance from a more knowledgeable peer to help you learn something new,
Right.
whereas the Piagetian view focuses more on the learning that happens when you encounter different perspectives and work through those disagreements yourself. Is that a fair summary?
That's a great way to put it. Let's dive into the Vygotskian perspective first.
Okay. What's the core of that view?
The Vygotskian view really emphasizes that our cognitive development and learning are fundamentally rooted in social interaction. Learning essentially moves from a social level, where we interact with others, to an individual internal level as we internalize what we've learned. Vygotsky believed that higher-level mental functions originate in these shared social processes. Think about a child learning a new skill, like riding a bike, with guidance from a parent. Initially, they need a lot of physical and verbal support, but gradually they internalize the process and can do it independently.
Right.
Cognitive structures, according to Vygotsky, are acquired through this kind of interaction, which often involves mediation through language and observing more skilled individuals.
And the crucial concept in Vygotsky's theory for understanding peer learning is the zone of proximal development, right?
Exactly. The zone of proximal development, or ZPD, is the space between what a learner can currently do independently and what they have the potential to achieve with help from a more capable partner, whether that's an adult or a more knowledgeable peer.
Okay.
Effective learning, from this perspective, happens when the more capable individual provides appropriate support or scaffolding to the learner within their ZPD, helping them to reach that next level of understanding or skill.
So peer learning in this context is about pairing someone who knows more with someone who knows less, with the more knowledgeable peer providing that necessary scaffolding.
That's the general idea. Reciprocal teaching is a really good example of an instructional approach that's based on Vygotskian principles. It typically starts with the teacher explicitly modeling key comprehension strategies, such as asking clarifying questions, summarizing the main points, making predictions about what will come next, and identifying any difficulties in understanding the text. Gradually, the students take on these roles themselves, essentially scaffolding each other's understanding of the material.
That makes a lot of sense. But what are some of the potential challenges or limitations when using a Vygotskian approach to peer learning?
One significant challenge is that simply being more skilled in a particular area doesn't automatically make a student a good teacher or mentor. For the help being offered to be truly effective for the learner, several conditions really need to be in place. As the research of people like Noreen Webb highlights,
Like what?
The help needs to be directly relevant to the learner's specific misunderstanding. It needs to be provided at the right level of detail, not too much and not too little. It needs to be timely. The explanation needs to be clear and understandable to the learner, and the learner needs to have both the opportunity and the willingness to actually use the explanation and try to understand.
Wow.
These are actually quite sophisticated social and metacognitive skills that younger children in particular may not have fully developed.
So just because a student understands the material better doesn't mean they know how to explain it effectively to someone else who is struggling.
Precisely. And some research, as the paper points out, has even suggested that younger children can sometimes be quite ineffective as teachers to their peers. Also, introducing external rewards in these kinds of peer tutoring situations might actually have a negative impact on the quality of the dialogue and the overall learning experience, potentially making students more focused on just getting through the task rather than on genuine understanding.
Right, back to the rewards issue. So what are some ways to make a Vygotskian peer learning approach work more effectively?
Cross-age tutoring, where older students work with younger students, can be a particularly effective strategy because the older students are more likely to have developed the communication and explanation skills needed to provide that effective scaffolding.
That's interesting.
Another important approach is to directly teach students how to provide this kind of supportive instruction and how to engage in helpful dialogue with their peers, which is a key element of techniques like reciprocal teaching.
Okay.
Also, Vygotsky's original ideas often focused on that one-on-one interaction, dyadic learning, which can often be optimal for that continuous adjustment of scaffolding to the learner's individual needs. Larger groups can sometimes make it more difficult to provide that personalized support.
And the teacher's role in a Vygotskian approach shifts to being more of a guide and a facilitator.
Exactly. The teacher's role evolves. They often start by acting as a model, explicitly demonstrating the learning strategies. They might also provide prompts and suggestions to the students as they work together, encourage them to explain their thinking, and offer alternative ways of approaching problems. Essentially, they support the students in their efforts to teach each other and can provide concrete materials and structures to facilitate shared understanding.
Now let's turn our attention to the Piagetian side of the cognitive developmental approach. How does their view of peer learning differ from Vygotsky's?
As researchers like Tudge and Rogoff have pointed out, Piaget's work places less emphasis on social interaction as the primary engine of development compared to Vygotsky. From a Piagetian perspective, peer learning becomes effective because it creates opportunities for what's called conceptual growth through processes of disequilibration and subsequent reequilibration.
Disequilibration, reequilibration, okay.
Basically, when students interact with peers who have different understandings or who approach a problem in a different way, it can create a state of cognitive conflict within the learner. Trying to resolve this conflict, to make sense of these different perspectives, can lead to the construction of new and more advanced knowledge structures.
So it's more about that clash of ideas and perspectives leading to learning.
Precisely. Peer interaction, for example, can be really helpful in situations where children are in the process of understanding concepts like conservation. The idea that the amount of something stays the same, even if its appearance changes.
Right, right.
Interacting with peers who have already grasped this concept can challenge the thinking of those who haven't, leading to cognitive growth. Piaget identified specific conditions that need to be in place for this equilibration process to occur effectively during interaction.
Okay, what are those?
The partners need to have a somewhat common level of understanding of the topic. They should be able to maintain their own ideas and explain their reasoning without constantly contradicting themselves. And there needs to be a sense of mutuality where both perspectives are valued and considered. In this approach, groups with relatively similar levels of ability are often preferred, as this can facilitate that productive cognitive conflict. External rewards are generally considered less important in Piagetian approaches. The task itself should be engaging and encourage exploration and discussion.
What are some of the potential challenges or pitfalls in a Piagetian approach to peer learning?
One potential issue is ensuring that all students are actively involved in the interaction. If some members are passive or disengaged, they're unlikely to experience that crucial cognitive conflict and therefore won't benefit as much from the activity. Status differences within the group based on things like popularity or perceived academic ability can also hinder true mutuality, as some students might dominate the discussion while others don't feel comfortable sharing their ideas or challenging others.
That makes sense.
Without some level of guidance, students might also fail to actually experience or successfully resolve the cognitive conflict that arises. There's even a possibility in some cases of what's been called conceptual regression, where a student might adopt a less sophisticated understanding after interacting with a peer.
Oh, wow. So how can we try to avoid these problems when using a Pygiation framework for peer learning?
Techniques like Johnson's structured controversy seem to align well with this approach. These are designed to intentionally promote intellectual conflict by having students research and then argue for different perspectives on the same issue, with the ultimate goal of reaching a consensus based on the evidence. This kind of structured interaction encourages that active testing of ideas and exposure to different viewpoints, while also providing a framework for resolving the conflict productively.
And the teacher's role in a Pygiation approach is primarily about setting the stage for that interaction to occur.
Exactly. The teacher carefully selects collaborative tasks that are likely to lead to discussion, disagreement, and the sharing of different perspectives. They initiate the group activities and then primarily act as a facilitator of learning rather than directly dispensing knowledge. Their role is to organize the learning environment in a way that encourages peer interaction and provides opportunities for that productive cognitive conflict to emerge and be resolved by the students themselves.
Okay, finally, let's delve into the cognitive elaboration approach.
Yeah.
What's the central theme here?
This approach shifts the focus slightly to the individual cognitive processing that happens during the interaction with peers. The main idea is that the benefits of peer learning arise from students actively processing and elaborating on information together. Verbalization is really key in this perspective.
Verbalization.
Yeah. When students explain concepts to each other, ask questions, and try to articulate their understanding, it helps them to rehearse and reorganize their own knowledge.
So it's not just about getting the right answer, but about the process of explaining it.
Precisely. The research of Noreen Webb has been particularly influential in this area, consistently showing that students who provide elaborated responses when helping a peer, meaning they give detailed explanations and reasoning, tend to demonstrate greater learning gains themselves.
Wow.
It's that active engagement in explaining and thinking through the material in order to articulate it to someone else that really solidifies their own understanding.
But in a typical unstructured group setting, do all members necessarily get those valuable opportunities for elaboration?
That's a significant challenge with this approach. In many unstructured groups, not all members will naturally provide those detailed explanations or actively participate in the discussion. Several factors in these kinds of settings can limit access to these crucial cognitive opportunities. These include the size and composition of the group itself, as well as the status dynamics that can emerge within the group.
How does the size of the group play a role here?
Well, as the group gets larger, there are simply fewer opportunities for each individual student to talk and explain their thinking. Webb's research, for example, has often found that pairs of students tend to have the most productive interactions in terms of providing and receiving elaborated explanations.
Okay, pairs seem optimal there. And how does the composition of the group, in terms of the students' different abilities, affect this?
In groups with a mix of abilities, it's often the higher ability students who tend to do the majority of the explaining, while students who are struggling more might primarily ask for help without necessarily having the chance to articulate their own understanding.
Right.
Students who are somewhere in the middle in terms of their ability might sometimes participate the least in these kinds of unstructured discussions. Interestingly, factors like gender can also play a role, with research suggesting that boys sometimes tend to dominate verbal interactions in groups where there isn't an equal gender balance. The use of rewards in these more diverse and unstructured groups can sometimes even amplify these uneven patterns of interaction.
And that recurring issue of status within a group seems like it would be particularly relevant here.
It is very relevant. Students who have lower status within the group, for whatever reason, perhaps they're less confident or they're perceived as less academically strong by their peers, might have fewer opportunities to participate in those crucial verbalizations and elaborate on their thinking.
Yeah.
This can become even more pronounced as the task that the group is working on becomes more difficult. Sociological theories, like expectation states theory, help to explain how these kinds of power and prestige structures can develop quite quickly within a group, even among students who seem relatively similar. Students who are perceived as having higher status tend to talk more, are asked for help more often by their peers, and their ideas often carry more weight within the group. This can unfortunately mean that not all participants are getting the cognitive engagement they need to truly benefit from the peer learning experience.
So what are some strategies we can use to address these issues of unequal participation and ensure more opportunities for elaboration in a cognitive elaboration approach?
One effective way is to structure the interactions within the group more directly. Instead of just telling students to work together, you can use specific techniques like scripted cooperation.
Scripted cooperation, okay.
In this approach, students are given specific roles and a sequence of steps to follow during their interaction, which ensures that everyone gets a chance to summarize information, provide feedback to their partner, elaborate on their understanding, and even alternate roles.
Okay, that sounds very structured.
It is. There are also interventions that are specifically designed to address status issues within groups, such as those developed by Elizabeth Cohen and her colleagues. These involve training students to be better listeners and to recognize the diverse abilities and contributions of all group members.
Ah, interesting.
Additionally, cooperative learning techniques like Jigsaw, where each student is responsible for learning and then teaching a unique piece of information that is essential for the group to complete a task, can be very effective in promoting equal participation and ensuring that everyone has a reason and a need to explain their part to the others.
Jigsaw, right, I've heard of that. So in a cognitive elaboration approach, the teacher's role shifts towards carefully designing those interactions to promote more active processing.
Exactly. The teacher takes on the role of a facilitator of cognitive activities. They encourage students to provide detailed explanations, to actively rehearse information by explaining it to others, and to engage in metacognitive reflection on their own learning and the learning of their peers. They carefully select tasks that lend themselves to discussion and explanation, and might even provide specific scripts or guidelines for how students should interact, creating deliberately heterogeneous groups in terms of ability, and then closely monitoring their interactions to make sure that everyone has a relatively equal opportunity to engage cognitively are also key aspects of the teacher's role in this approach.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the complexities of learning from peers. It's definitely not as simple as just putting people together in groups and hoping for the best outcome.
Absolutely. Understanding these different theoretical perspectives really highlights that peer learning is a multifaceted approach with a variety of underlying mechanisms at play. Each of these mechanisms has its own potential benefits, but also its own set of potential challenges that need to be considered.
Yeah.
Effective implementation of peer learning really hinges on understanding these nuances and making informed choices about instructional strategies based on the specific learning goals and the characteristics of the learners.
It's about looking beyond just the general idea that peer learning is good and really digging into the why and the how of what happens when students learn together.
Precisely. And hopefully this deep dive has provided you, our listener, with a much clearer framework for thinking about your own experiences with group learning, both positive and negative.
So, for our final thought today, think about the group learning experiences you've been a part of throughout your life. Can you now look back and identify which of these different theoretical perspectives might have been at play in those situations? What specific factors do you think contributed to the successes or the failures of those collaborations? And based on these insights, how might you approach future group work or study sessions differently?
Yeah, that's a great question to ponder.
We really encourage you to explore the work of the researchers we've mentioned, Slavin, Johnson & Johnson, Webb, Vygotsky, Piaget, and others, to delve even deeper into this fascinating and surprisingly complex area. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.